You ever heard that youth pastors are lazy, they're disorganized, or they're just waiting to become a real pastor? Yeah, me too. And honestly, I think it's time we defy all that nonsense. In this episode, I'm breaking down how to defy those stereotypes, earn parents' trust, and lead a student ministry that makes a real impact. Let's change the narrative. Let's win in Next Gen ministry. Hey everybody, welcome to the Brent Parsley Next Gen Leader Podcast. My name is Brent. I hope today's episode helps you win in Next Gen ministry. I want to help you with the how of Next Gen ministry so that you can do what matters most. And I just want to say at the top, thanks so much for the outpouring of love and support as I've launched this thing. So many of you have been so kind and gracious and encouraging. I've heard from past students. It's all been so meaningful and wonderful, and I'm really grateful. So thank you so much. So let's get right to it. I got a lot of core values that have shaped how I do Next Gen ministry. I like to think a lot about the how and the why behind the how. What are the values that drive how we do ministry? And those have developed over the years, mostly through experience, some good, some bad. But some of those came really early on for me. And one of those early core values was defy the youth pastor stereotype. And I mean defy it, push back hard. I spent a lot of time and energy trying to ensure that I wasn't a stereotypical youth pastor. And as I think back, I wonder where that came from. I graduated from college and started right away at this multi-thousand member church. And so I think that brought some pressures. My lead pastor was influential. He's becoming more influential. So it's possible that some of that was impacting me. I also think it may have been that when I started, honestly, I was really insecure. And that insecurity can drive you to lead out of fear. And so you spend a lot of time just trying not to screw things up. You're doing a lot of image management. You're trying to protect your reputation, which from the outside looks like you're really doing a good job. And we can psychoanalyze me later. I'd love to think that my reasons for not being stereotypical were all altruistic, but the truth is it was probably a little more complicated, especially in those early years. And so that's okay. That was my story. It may be your story, but that doesn't have to disqualify you. But you can't stay that way either, just like I couldn't. We got to move on. So I always cared deeply about making sure that we were perceived as a safe, steady student ministry that was following the Holy Spirit. And that's what I want to encourage you to do today. So let's define the terms. What is a stereotype? You already know. It's a generalized belief in a group of people that assumes all the members of that group share those same common characteristics, and they can be positive or negative. They can even be neutral. So we've got age stereotypes and gender stereotypes and race stereotypes, cultural stereotypes. Like it or hate it, they're just a part of the world that we live in. And we use them to make assumptions about people, and they can be pretty harmless or they can be pretty destructive and become discrimination. But it's an oversimplified, unjustified opinion about somebody that you don't know, and typically it's just not fair. But the uncomfortable truth is, many stereotypes do happen for a reason, and they happen because of perceived repeated actions across that group. Notice that I said perceived, so they might not even be grounded in reality, but perceived action creates that belief. So in some ways, we as pastors and leaders, we are responsible for the stereotype, which means we contribute to it, or we defy it or deny it by our actions. And that's the bummer, honestly, right? At least it can be the bummer, to tell you the truth. You may not live up to the stereotype, but because others do, you get lumped into it. So the more people that push back, though, on the stereotype, the less power that stereotype holds. And that's why I think the subject matters today. So what are we talking about? Why does it really matter? Because this goes beyond our insecurities and our image management. For me, this boils down to three big ideas: trust, effectiveness, and faithfulness. Parents have to trust us. And we haven't always talked enough about parents' trust in our ministries and in us as leaders. We probably do a pretty good job when it comes to kids ministry, but when it gets into student ministry, oftentimes this conversation kind of falls off and isn't quite as robust. But in Next Gen ministry, trust is the key. You don't get to do ministry to kids or students if you don't have the trust of parents. And that's really important. If you don't earn their trust, you don't get to minister to their kids. When I was young, I thought, man, parents are the problem. We could do a great job around here if it wasn't for all these parents screwing kids up. And over the years, I realized, no, parents are the key. You could say it like this: parents aren't the problem, parents are actually the solution. And that's because parents are still the number one influence in a kid's life. So we have to earn their trust. And yes, I said earn it, which means you're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to prove your trustworthiness over and over and over again. And that is going to take a long time. In fact, it'll take much longer than you want it to or think that it should. And the hard part is it can be lost in a moment. One bad decision can bring it all crashing down depending on how bad that decision is, and we got to avoid that. But if you earn their trust, you get the opportunity to be effective, right? When they trust you, they'll allow you the opportunity to be effective in their kids' lives. You got big dreams, you got big plans, you have a burning passion to minister to kids and students, and that's awesome. But with trust, you get the option of being effective and working to bring those dreams into a reality. And then if you're going to be effective, that's really just going to lead you into being faithful. You're being faithful to obey God and what he has called you to do. So pushing back on the stereotype should result in trust that leads to effectiveness, which is ultimately leading to faithfulness before God. And you see this in the scriptures. Luke 16:10 says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Matthew 25 is the parable of the talents. And it talks about that if you're faithful with a little bit, you get entrusted with more. And it's not about fairness. Like, you don't get a reward for just playing the game. You get rewarded when you are faithful. Yes, that's a loose interpretation, but you get the point. So what are the youth pastor stereotypes? Most of the time in this podcast, I want to try to talk about the whole of Next Gen Ministry, but sometimes we'll kind of dig down into kids or students. And today we're going to talk primarily about youth pastors. And we don't need to spend a lot of time here, but here's some of the stereotypes that I've heard, and you probably have too. They are lazy, unproductive, and irresponsible. That's rough. Right? They roll out of bed late, throw on some nasty clothes, get to the church office late, pretty much always late to everything, not really ready for Wednesday night, working on the message to the last minute, on and on and on. They might say that the stereotype is there's no plans and no communication. Like, they're just winging it most days. Nothing's really going on. Parents are confused about what's happening, and so they're frustrated. And even if they do make some plans, they don't communicate well, so parents are having to comb through the website just to find out what time their kid's supposed to be there. Another stereotype is they see youth ministry as a stepping stone. This is a pretty common one. He's got his eye on the bigger prize. He wants to become a real pastor, which is a horrible thing. Let's never say it. So I'm going to bide my time in students. I'm waiting for the big dance, to go to the big show, being a lead pastor of my own church. Or in today's world, they just want to be an influencer. So Wednesday nights are really about Instagram clips that I can cut up and post so that I can grow my following. In some cases, the stereotype is they're dangerous. Like, they put my kids in danger doing these dangerous things without even thinking about it. And maybe one of the final ones I could think of today is that they just hang out with teenagers and all they want to do is have fun. Essentially, they're just an overgrown teenager. Well, I think that we can and should defy all these stereotypes. So look, this isn't going to be a comprehensive list, but I'm going to start with a few things that I think are really important. I think I probably have around 6, and I'm sure there's a lot more. You probably have some yourself. I'd love to hear about them in the comments below if you're on YouTube. And the first way to defy the stereotype is to stay. Like, man, just stay. Don't leave. Be content and faithful where you are. We've become sort of conditioned in our current culture to want to leave when anything seems like it's not working. I think part of that comes from the moralistic therapeutic deism water that we're all swimming in, where we just believe that God wants me to be happy and that's what God is for. Part of it, I think, is the consumer-driven culture that we live in. Everything is marketed to us and aimed at our happiness. Part of that is the deconstruction culture that's become so prevalent, where we sort of believe, well, the church is actually the problem. Listen, I just want to say, I don't believe the church is the problem. The church is not the problem. People are the problem. People get mad about this because they think that's an oversimplification, but it's true. Bad manners are the problem. Unhealthy people are the problem, right? And they are the ones that lead to the systems that create the issues. But unfortunately, here's the big thing. Jesus chose people as his church. Like, there's no other option. He chose people as the church. And so he hasn't given up on her, so neither can we. Now, so some say that the average stay for a youth pastor is about 18 months, and that's probably not really true. I think the best research probably says it's more like 3 to 4 years for a full-time person. What we know is that longevity in ministry leads to more fruitfulness and effectiveness. So just because you and your lead pastor, you don't see eye to eye on something does not mean that it's time to go. It may be time to get in a room and work it out. It may be a time for you to be humble and just submit. And in some cases, it might be time to leave, but that is not the place to start. Not every bit of discomfort that you experience is a toxic environment. Sometimes it's just responsibilities. Toxicity happens when the behaviors are repeated and intentional. And yeah, you might need to get out of that situation. But for most of us, we should stay longer than we think we should. The second way that you can defy the stereotype is to get organized. I'm kind of blown away by the number of people that I look around and see that don't ever write anything down. Like, you might be young and your brain might be functioning great, better than mine, but there's just no way to effectively operate and do all the things that you're supposed to do out of what is stored in your head. I may need to talk about this more a little bit later, but I think that you need 4 specific tools to really help you lead well, and I use them every day. The first is you need a calendar. You need a place to put where everything goes for what you're going to do. You should have a ministry calendar. You should have a personal calendar. You probably need a marriage or family calendar if you've got kids or a wife or a husband. You need a friends calendar to keep track of when you're going out with buddies or friends. I work off of a block schedule every single week that tells me what I'm doing at what hours, and that really helps me get all of my stuff done. That's a separate calendar that I have. And of course, it's easy today. Paper's fine if that's you and you want to write it down on paper, but your iPhone has a calendar. I suppose Androids have a calendar. I don't know. I use the phone that all God's people use. I'm sorry, that's low-hanging fruit. That was a low blow. I use a calendar in my phone, and I also have a paper calendar so that I can see a whole month at a time really easily. So that's the first thing. The second thing is get a to-do list. What are you aiming at, and how do you know that you accomplished it? You don't really know unless you've written it down. I know that this is kind of personality-based most of the time, and I'm not a list maker, but I highly recommend having somewhere where you keep track of what you're doing and how much you're accomplishing. I use Things, which is an app on my iPhone, and it's great for me. The third thing is I recommend you get a notes app. I have a basic text app that I can think and plan and strategize in. I don't want a million Google Docs or Pages files all over my Mac. I want a place where I can capture my thoughts and kind of work things out. I use the app called Bear. It's really simple, but it's organized by hashtags so that I can always search the thing I'm working on. So if I'm working on a kids policy project, I can work in there. I can put a hashtag on it, hashtag policy, and I can search policy later and see all the policies that I've been working on. Or maybe I'm working on a follow-up system, so I can put hashtag follow-up, and I can get all the documents that I've been working on that relate to follow-up. It's really good, really helpful, helps you keep organized, means you don't have to have a bunch of incomplete documents all over your computer or in the cloud. The fourth one is you need a way to communicate. A way to communicate with the church staff, with your volunteers, your leaders, parents, students. We use Slack, and it's great. Even the free version is great. You can use GroupMe or whatever. Just have a way that you can communicate to people regularly and keep things moving. Third way to defy the stereotype is make some strategic plans and put them on that calendar. Look at your year, propose a strategic plan to reach and disciple the kids or students in your care. If you're not a year planner, that's great. Maybe you could do 9 months. Maybe you could do 6 months. Maybe you could do 3 months. But make some plans and write them down. Like, what message series are you going to do throughout the year? What events are you scheduling? What events always happen? Get them down on the calendar so you make sure you reserve the stuff you need to reserve. We always had a summer camp. We had 2 retreats in the spring and fall. Today, we typically have a summer camp. We have a VBS, which we call Summer Blast for kids, and we have a fall retreat for students. So we know what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. It's written down. The fourth way to defy the stereotype is communicate early and often. Once you got stuff written down, start telling everybody about it. One of the big complaints that you hear about youth pastors is they don't communicate. Parents don't know what's going on. They're not sure of the details for the event coming up, and they're searching for answers. Parents should never have to search for answers. So here's a few things that I recommend you do. Put it on the church's calendar. Make sure that the church staff knows. Get it into your church's announcement schedule early. Like, be the first ones to get there. Create a parent printout maybe, 1 month at a time or 3 months at a time, has all the events listed out. You can mail it. You can have it available on Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights. It's an incredible way to kind of help parents know what's happening. I recommend that everybody does a weekly email. Tell parents what's happening. Tell them stories. Give them the relevant dates. They'll really appreciate being up to speed. And if you're not a writer, get somebody to proofread it so you don't get accused of the stereotype, well, this guy doesn't know how to put a sentence together. All right. Having a text thread is a great way to communicate. That people may not see emails, but they're going to see a text when it hits their phone. So allow people to jump into that. We use Gloo, Gloo. It's an incredible platform. You should check it out. And then, of course, there's social media, and you could use Instagram and other things to communicate the events and also to tell stories of what's going on. So communicate. The fifth way to defy the stereotype is, and I really think this is a big one, think like a parent. This is a massive skill that will make you a great student pastor and a great kids pastor. Thinking like a parent and keeping kids safe. When I got started, I was young, I was newly married, I had no kids, so I didn't have a parent's perspective at all. I would take students up to retreat on a Friday night, and I would tell them, hey, make sure you eat before you come. But then we had no snacks or anything, and all these kids are laying in their bunks, just starving at night. My wife feels terrible for them. And I was like, they're fine. What happens is when you become a parent, and it's your kids that get involved in the activity, suddenly you got a whole bunch of new thoughts about how the student team is really doing. Why did they do it that way? What are they thinking? Right? So start getting that perspective now. And if that's tough for you, that's okay. Ask some trusted parents, gather together a trusted parent team, and tell them about your plans. Get their feedback before you go live. Let them help you. Other parents will thank you, and it's going to increase the effectiveness of your ministry. And you know what? Here's a big one. Always be on time. Always. Tell them when your services are going to end, and end them no matter what's happening. When you tell them a return time from a camp or retreat, hit it no matter what, and watch how the trust grows. And then the fifth way, I don't know what number I'm on, but another way to defy the stereotype is to outwork your pastor. Now, this is probably a little controversial today. We're having a lot of conversations about boundaries and rest and Sabbath, and those are all good, by the way. I'll probably talk some about that later. But when you're young and starting out and have lots of energy, you can and should use that for the kingdom of God. Yes, you should still have boundaries. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you don't need the same boundaries that a 35-year-old with young kids needs to have. So my lead pastor would always teach youth pastors to outwork their senior pastor. And that always struck great fear deep down in my heart because I knew how he worked. He worked hard and long hours. So I'm saying it a little tongue-in-cheek here, but the principle is still right. Look at your lead pastor, see how he works, watch his pacing, and try to match it. Work hard. Get up early, have your devos, get to the church early, stay all day, don't try to sneak out, put in the hours, be on time or early for meetings, even if you don't like the meetings. We oftentimes have different schedules with Wednesday night meetings or, come in late Thursday mornings and stuff like that. But the point is, watch your pastor and his pacing and work like him. And the final way to defy the stereotype is to let time be your friend. I'm a big believer in staying in kids and student ministry for the long haul. Even when I was young and just getting started, I could see the need for having more fathers and mothers in student ministry so that we could gain from their wisdom and experience. But as you stay in it for the long haul, you should really be thinking about making some adjustments. Time and experience should mature you and grow you, and time can do that if you let it. Like, you shouldn't be making the same mistakes at 45 or 30 or whatever that you were making at 22. Right? You should grow. And no one wants to see a 45-year-old dressing exactly the same as a 22-year-old. Your pastor doesn't want it. Parents don't want to see it. Students don't need to see it. Your wife doesn't want to look at it, or your husband. Just allow time to be your friend and grow along with it. Listen, if more of us make sure to do these types of things, I believe we could actually make a difference here. Maybe we could even create a new youth pastor stereotype where somebody says, that girl's a youth pastor. I mean, I don't know her, but that must mean that she's one of the most responsible and hardworking people you've ever seen. I mean, you bet I'm going to trust her to take my kid on that retreat. Where do I sign up? We need more of that. So what did I miss? What are your stereotypes? What have you heard? And what do you think pushes back on those stereotypes? If you're on YouTube, drop a comment and let's talk about it. And if this was helpful in any way, please subscribe. And if you think it's worthy of it, leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. That really helps get the word out. And as always, if you want to talk, you can email me at brent@brentparsley.me, or you can DM me at brentparsley on Instagram. And until next time, everybody, I hope today helps you win in Next Gen Ministry.